Welcome to Minority Trip Report. MTR is a podcast spotlighting stories of personal transformation and underrepresented leaders in mental health, psychedelics, and consciousness. I'm your host, Raj Siraj. If you're learning from or enjoying Minority Trip Report, please subscribe to MTR on YouTube at Minority Trip Report and follow us on Instagram at Minority Trip. Thank you and enjoy the episode. Today, my guest is Merlin Huynh, who discovered the power of psychedelic therapy at the age of 15, which helped him find solace and healing from deep childhood trauma. The experience ignited his lifelong dedication to holistic mental health. With over 3 years at Sero, one of the leading companies in alternative mental health, Merlin educates the public on the benefits of microdosing. As a psychedelic facilitator, he guides transformative journeys that focus specifically on integration and holistic well-being. Merlin, you magician wizard, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, brother.
First and foremost, I warned you I'm going to ask you this, and this is particularly interesting because I think it hits at where we are as a society, as an ecosystem, and so on. Why did you choose to be on camera? Knowing what you do, why did you decide to be on camera and agree to do a podcast interview like this?
Creating precedents. For me, it's creating precedents, especially in the Asian community. I can't tell you how many times I've been on the lookout for other Asians who want to talk about mental health and who are looking for tools for mental health. And there are so few of us. So I feel that by me coming on here and showing myself the courage, that it will maybe allow other Asians to also feel the courage to at least ask for information and
That's a wonderful answer because it is Asian Heritage Month, right? And I think the word Asian itself is quite loaded because what is it, like 1 billion people and more? Jumble us into one word. Obviously, we're all homogenous, right? We all look alike, say alike, same distinct. Obviously not, but you know what I mean? Why do you think it touches our people, our backgrounds, and so on? Why do you think this is particularly more important for us? Not more important, but particularly important for us.
I think I can speak for look, we live in Toronto. Everybody's an immigrant here for the most part. And the reason why all our parents, grandparents, and ancestors have left their respective countries to come here is to give us a better life, because clearly it was a shithole back there and there was no chance of ever getting through it. So I think that that's what we all have in common, is we're all descendants, if not immigrant survivors.
That's really important. And we're going to really dig into this particular aspect of like migration. Why do we come here? And I always find, this thing about migration that really, it doesn't tell you the whole story, which is like, yes, we came here for a reason, but why do we leave? And you bring the story of colonization, you're like, oh yeah, somebody else fucked it up. And so we left. Because honestly, why would you want to leave your home, your families, everything that you know? Like maybe not us, but our parents certainly made a sacrifice. Why do we leave, right? So the story goes far back from just our families and our experience. Did you feel like, did you have a very clear conviction, when you decided to say yes to this interview? Did you have was it clear to you, or did it come to you like, yeah, you know what, I'll come on camera? Or was it ever an issue for you?
It was clear to me, we can dive in a lot more after, but it was clear to me because my family knows what I do, but it has taken a long time for me to get here and for my family and I to be in this agreement.
Well, let's talk about that. I was going to touch on it later on, but since it came up, let's talk about that. Your family knows what you do. You also have a very big family, right? You have quite a few siblings, right?
Yeah, so we're a reconstructed family. My dad essentially had 2 wives and a girlfriend, and of course, different times in their life. So we're 11 kids. So
how did the
family.
process of like you doing what you do, how did that even come up? And how did they take it? What was the process like?
So funny enough, my sister, who is considered now the matriarch of the family, both my parents passed away a little while ago. But so I have one sister who's considered the matriarch, who her say is the only say. She came to visit me during COVID 3 years ago. And then she just started asking me, so what do you do now? And I'm like, I work in mental health. I work for a mushroom microdosing company. She's okay. And then is this legal? I'm like, it's not illegal, but it's not legal either. But then we started talking about like the benefits of, how it can help with anxiety and depression. And essentially one of my nieces, one of her daughters was actually suffering from anxiety and depression. And she was basically prescribed antidepressants And my sister was like, man, I don't really like that she's on the antidepressant. It, she's not her anymore. So I just left it that way and I just explained to her and I let her come to me. I still remember we went for Korean lunch and then she was the one who opened the door and asked me all the questions. And by the time she left my home, she actually said, hey, when you come and visit us in Montreal, would you
Mm,
bring some samples for her? So a month afterwards, I went back to Montreal. That's where most of my family is. And I did give my niece some of those microdose capsules. And she ended up messaging me about 2 weeks later, like, hey, uncle, I just can't thank you enough. Like, I feel great. I feel like myself, but I also feel supported without feeling distorted from the other medication. And then my sister has another daughter, and I actually ended up putting her as well on the medication, on the plant medicine, and she also messaged me to tell me,
mm.
"Wow, fucking
What
game
was the
changer."
first thing that they noticed in terms of changing and impact?
They just noticed that they were happy, grounded, but also if they were going through a challenging moment, that it wasn't so challenging. So it just, yeah, the medicine just allowed them to go about their
Mm.
day with more ease, even though it was challenging.
Interesting. Were they surprised by that?
They were very surprised by that. Yeah, because I think them using antidepressant, it just numbed
Mm,
them and dumbed them. What they described to me. And here they were like, wow, I can actually access happiness
mm.
while going through
And
a
so, how did
challenge.
your sister sort of see this impact? Obviously, I'm sure she's quite happy and relieved that her daughters found relief in it. But did you feel like a change in her complete change in her attitude towards, hey, this is illegal, don't be near it, to like, oh, okay, maybe I'm wrong.
100%. It completely changed her perspective. Seeing the change in both her daughters, she didn't even ask me any more questions. If anything, every time that I would, I'd call her and we'd catch up, she's like, hey, how's the mushroom business going? I'm like, wow, like I've gone so far. When my sister is asking, it's like my parents asking me, "Yo, how's that illegal business doing?"
What about the rest of your siblings?
So of course, because my sister is the go-to, if all of my
Yeah,
siblings no
you
longer
converted
judge
the
me.
matriarch.
Literally.
Amazing. Okay, let's put a pin on this because I think family dynamics are really interesting, at least in perspective of medicine, right? For me, I think like
Yeah.
part of the mission for me has been to say that, in the West, everything revolves around the individual. What's healing to you? You serving yourself. Self care is about you, and that's it. But I think like a lot of our cultures, and that's not to say West doesn't have culture, but I think a lot of what we experience and struggle with sometimes, like how do we fit in within the context of our family, of our relationships, all of which are important. Obviously, now every now and then we have to shed relationships that don't serve us anymore. But this aspect of like, how does medicine inform your relationships? Does it enhance it? Does it allow you to overcome familial traumas and experiences and so on? But before we talk about that in particular, you used to be a teacher.
I used to be a teacher at George Brown, indeed.
Okay, let's talk about how you became a teacher. And I mean, I guess in a way you're still teaching, right? You're just teaching in a different domain. But give us a sense of that
Yeah.
line that connects the George Brown teacher to now.
Yeah. I mean, I used to work in hotels my entire life when I was a teenager all the way until I want to say my mid 30s, actually. Worked in hotels as a concierge. If you ever watched Grand Budapest Hotel, Mr. Gustav, that was me. The guy who just pulled all the string and orchestrated for everything to happen. And then after that, I ended up working in LA as like a personal assistant to various different celebrities. And then I had my fill, and I had to leave the industry. And I got back to Montreal, worked for a year as a general manager in a hotel. And I was like, fuck, I don't want to be in Montreal anymore. I'm too close to my family. So then I essentially just found a job as a personal assistant down here in Toronto and then did that for 7 years. And I was like, okay, I think I'm done like serving people
Yeah.
and I'm just going to start teaching people. So got a job at George Brown teaching hospitality management and I loved it. But then I just didn't feel fulfilled anymore. And yeah, the opportunity basically rose about 3.5 years ago A dear soul brother of mine was like, that we just met, obviously not by chance. Clearly, you know your shit when it comes to psychedelic. How about you come on this journey with me so that we can help people? And I was like, you know what? Instead of helping and shaping the young minds, I'm actually just going to
Mhm.
help people with their mind.
Well said. Do you see? It's interesting with hospitality, right? And I'll take a detour here for a second. I spent some time in hospitality, given, as a new immigrant, my first job was like cashier and busboy at Tim Hortons and then washing dishes at a falafel restaurant. Washed dishes for many, many years. And, no experience is bad experience. But I think like you get to see how hospitality is notorious for mental health, suffering, disorders. You know, back when you're young, you don't know how to tell the signs, but now you can sort of tell the signs, partly due to my own experiences and my own journey. But why do you think hospitality is so rife with mental health challenges, suffering, disorders, and so on?
I mean, mental health is so hard. It's long hours. You're definitely being bullied by your managers for the most part. You're just a number, and all it is just you cranking it up, and then you have no choice to start utilizing substances to stay up. I mean, of course, in kitchens, like they had to like use cocaine or drink out. There's always booze and cocaine when it comes to kitchen. It's a
Right.
classic. And, in the hotels, I can't tell you how many times I've seen people doing Adderalls or Vyvanse or Concerta just to keep it up. So it's
How did you
extremely
cope with that
toxic.
environment?
Me personally, thank God I had yoga, man. I
Mm.
gotta tell you, yoga and contrast therapy. Thankfully enough, early in my life, I had discovered contrast therapy, just doing cold plunges and sauna, just to release and relax. Don't get me wrong, though. Of course, I've had my fair share of partying really hard, doing ecstasy, just as like a coping mechanism and to numb. 100%, like I'm a culprit. I've definitely had a lot of escapism
Or
with
you allowed some
drugs.
vices, right? And we're all trying to do our best. It reminds
Yeah.
me of a joke. One of my favorite comedians back then, Greg Giraldo, had this bit about, you're walking on the street and then some homeless guy is asking you for money. And you're like, if I give you money, you're just going to spend it on drugs. But the thing is, that's what I'm going to spend it on. What the fuck? What's the problem? Yeah. Why am I judging this
Fact.
guy? That's so. Do you feel, and maybe give us a sense of, we'll talk about Sero in a bit near the end because I want to spend some time particularly on what Sero does, what it means, and like how you guys are navigating the very complex regulatory environment. But give us a sense of what you do at Sero day to day, and then where does that line again? For me, at least, watching from the outside, there is a line between you being a teacher and working with others, and then what you're doing, because so much of what you do is of what Sarah does is about education, right? So give us a sense of what do you do in Sarah day by day, and then how what's that through line?
Yeah, so in my case, I'm the resident educator and also the community like grower. For me, it's like my job is to go out there and connect with people and to help bring down the stigma. So anybody who has any interest in the medicine and wanted to hear about it and to be able to have an extra tool so that they can just change their lifestyle, I'm that person who's just going to connect with you and basically give you all the information. I'll ask you if you're on any kind of medication, see if it's contraindicative. And then, of course, community outreach in the sense of going out to festivals and doing workshops. So, yeah, I fucking love what I do, which is just to basically
I mean,
go
that's
out
probably how
there.
I met you. So you're doing the right thing. You're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
Do you feel that what is okay? Let me rephrase this question. What is the most challenging thing for people to grasp? Those who are first timers, those who are just approaching microdosing for the first time, or don't even really have an orientation. They're like, I thought psychedelics are bad, they fry your brain, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, the challenge is always how you can see how
Mm.
people have been programmed by their parents, their grandparents. Bad for you, kids. So then I have to come with science, right? Because they're a completely left brain, and I have to come with all the science to basically able to like, hey, no, there's this, it does this, it does this. These ingredients do this, it does this to your own body. So at least I can start bringing some sense of trust and safety just by
Is
utilizing
there a particular
science.
insight or fact where people usually go, oh, okay, or is it more of like repetition and trust building gradually?
Funny enough, you know what? The one thing that always hits the mark is The Body Keeps the Score, that book from Dr. Van der Kolk. As soon as I tell people about, hey man, like your body
Oh,
traps emotions, like it, and as soon as I tell them about how the medicine can actually help them unlock these trapped emotions, man, eureka moment.
that's a really good point, actually. I think a lot of us, it's interesting, right? With mental health, I feel like we're used to intellectualizing it. So if you can visualize it, if you can see it, if it's like an embedded memory that you can revisit, you're like, oh yeah, yeah, that's a real thing. But at least for me, and I feel like a lot of immigrants, a lot of people of color, because of what we have to go through, and maybe even I would go for us to say, even as men, of what we go through, we're not attuned to our bodies. And but when you say something where it's like this emotion, this anger, this whatever emotion is, it's in your body, and then somebody starts to see it as, oh, holy shit, I did breath work. Why the fuck am I crying? What the hell? This doesn't make any sense. Also,
Brother.
let's talk a little bit about go back to family. Now, one of the things that I it's almost hard to even imagine it when you first told me this. You lost your both your parents relatively young. Give us a sense of what was the story of your parents. You're originally from Vietnam. You have heritage from Vietnam. What was their story? How did they meet? Where did they come to Canada? And what happened there?
Yeah, my dad was previously married, had his first wife. She passed away from cancer. He actually had 7 kids with her, but 2 of those kids actually passed away
Is it in
young.
Vietnam?
So he only had 5. This is in Vietnam. So by the time he remarried my mom literally inherited 5 kids that
Wow.
didn't even belong to her. So she's a saint for that. And yeah, my parents had a business. They were just selling John Deere machines for agriculture. And, they were huge philanthropists. And the Vietnam War broke, Civil War, and we were in the South. And my dad was a badass. He turned our factory basically instead of making now part for these agriculture machines, he started making
Oh
mortars
shit!
like
For the
bazookas
guerrilla fighters. Damn.
for the guerrilla fighters. And then he trained his factory staff into soldiers. He was an army man. He used to work in the tank division as the head mechanical engineer of the tank division in the army. So he trained everybody to become soldiers. So he was a wanted man, and essentially the Northern Army came down to our village looking for my dad. Thankfully, he wasn't home, and they captured my
Mhm.
mom as a hostage, and she was put in a prison camp. And my mom was at the time pregnant with my brother, and I think that's what
Ooh,
actually saved her, is just being pregnant. So she was yeah, so my brother who's 4 years older than I, he actually was
holy
born in this
shit!
prison camp. Yeah, and my mom and him were in this prison camp for 4 years, from 73 to
Does she
77.
recall that experience? Does she talk about it, or is it way too traumatic?
She definitely had shared many details with me before she passed. It was very difficult. I never pried. I was always in little bits and pieces. So within, I want to say maybe 20 years, I was able to build this entire story because she would only release
Mm.
very small little bits and pieces. She was very numbed and closed off after her experience in prison.
How did she so it's there
Um,
for 4 years, what happened? How did she get out of that?
I guess, the war ended up like finishing, and then of course the North won. So then the prison camp released all the prisoners. And at the time, my dad basically was just waiting for my mom to get out of this prison camp. And during a entire whole year, he found a boat that was completely shipwrecked. And him, my uncle, and his best friend, they got together and put this boat together so that it could just be working. And when my mom got out of this prison camp, yeah, she made a straight beeline to the port, and all 3 families was on this boat and took off one way to wherever they could go. And I know after 2 weeks, they ran out of gas, they ran out of food, and their boat got picked up by our Norwegian commercial boat that was delivering petroleum in Singapore, basically. So now we were stowaways. Our 3 families were stowaways on this ship, and the boat captain messaged Oslo, the Norwegian government, and messaged the Singaporean government to ask for
Mm.
refugee status. My dad's best friend and his family took the deal, went to Oslo. So they basically left from Singapore to go to Oslo. And then my dad and my uncle and respective families, we decided to stay in Singapore. And I was literally born about like 10 months after we
Woof.
got there.
And your brother was still already around, right? And he's what, like five at this point or something?
Yeah, so now, yeah, all the brothers and sisters were half brothers, sisters, real brothers. Yeah, we were all in
And
Singapore
then you
together.
guys then came to Canada a few years after that.
Yeah, so shortly after that, my parents worked two jobs each just to like basically figure out get some money. My dad actually had stashed some gold bars with an uncle in Belgium, and I remember him going to Belgium to go see his uncle, only to come back, and it was the only time I saw my dad cry, only to tell us that his uncle had
Oh my
fucking
God.
gambled all of it. And essentially, yeah, my parents worked night and day for a little while just to be able to buy 12
Mm.
one-way tickets to Montreal because another uncle, my dad's uncle, sponsored us. And I still remember when we got to Montreal, we were living in the basement of my
Mhm.
granduncle. It was
At
dead.
this point, how many siblings and so you had your parents and how many siblings were there?
So yeah, nine siblings, two parents, so we're 12 sharing a
Holy shit,
basement
man.
and one bathroom.
Nuts. Nuts.
It was,
Do
yeah.
you have any memories of this time? You're relatively young, right?
I remember arriving here in Canada and it was in December and it was fucking cold and I still remember seeing my breath. I was like, what is? But yeah, I remember my parents just not being around for a huge
Mm.
chunk of my entire life. And which of course created a lot of abandonment and insecurity for me. I was always being babysat by one of my siblings.
Because they
My
were
parents were
working and
never
just
around.
hustling, trying to make ends meet.
Yeah.
At what point did you said your mom fell ill, right?
Yeah. Yeah, she fell ill and she essentially just passed away from a heart complications. But to be honest with you, I don't think I could have. I was just
Mm.
so happy that she went in the sense, of, wow, you
Mhm.
don't have to suffer anymore. Cause fuck, you have given us everything. You deserve to
What was it
rest.
like? You said you were stitching pieces together over 20 years. What was like the final period with her? Was she lucid? Did she open up more?
She definitely opened up more. So I think I can speak for a lot of Asian kids, but our parents, they don't know anything about the love languages, words of affirmation,
Acts of service
touch,
mostly,
or
but they
any
don't
of
call it
that.
love language. It's just, but it is a form of love language.
Just of course, but yeah, acts of service was it. And I remember, man, towards the end, my mom told me is like, "Of course I love you. I'm doing this for you." And it was the only time that my
Mhm.
mom said I love you, but through saying like a different sentence. Like, oh my
Yeah.
God, all right, I'll take it. And I remember, just before my mom just got really ill. We actually went to
Mm.
Myanmar together. I had asked her, like, hey, do you want to go somewhere? Just you and I. I'm gonna pay for this entire trip. And she said, I'd love to go to Myanmar. So I took her to this beautiful trip, 3 weeks together, and hoping to connect a little bit more with her. And the best that I got from her was like, of course I love you. I'm doing this for you. But I still remember this one crazy moment where she was taking a nap, so I left the room, and when I came back, she was on her iPad, basically just Zooming with another family member, and when I walked in, she said, "Oh, man, I'm having the time of my life, like, he's taking such good care of me." But as soon as I walked I just overheard that bit, but throughout the trip, my mom never showed any emotion, like, never showed that she was excited, happy, or anything. I was like, "Man, like, if it wasn't for that moment that I caught her saying that to another relative, I would have felt shitty inside going, man, she's having the worst time."
What do you think that is? I sometimes want. I mean, I actually think about this a lot nowadays. Because what is it? And I have to ask myself too, right? Why do I find it hard? It's easy to say I love you to your friends than to your family. Why is that? What is it?
I think for our parents, or at least my parents, emotions is a
Mm.
luxury that they did
Mm.
not have,
Mm.
during the war. And expressing emotions means
You don't
vulnerability,
have time
and
that. Yeah.
you don't have time to cry here. Like, you
Yeah.
gotta fucking get going.
Yeah.
Like,
That's
you gotta
right.
get shit done. Yeah.
What's why Myanmar, by the way?
My
Mm.
mom was a huge Buddhist, and she just wanted to
Oh,
go where Buddha went, basically. I would have never thought to go to Myanmar, honestly. Man, I've never seen so many Buddha statues in my entire life.
what was your dad at this time, and then what's your dad's story? Because he go soon after your mom?
My dad So my dad passed away 20 years ago. So in my mid 20s, yeah, my dad passed. So really early stage. And my mom, it must have been, I think it's about 7 years now that
Mhm, mhm.
she's passed.
And
Yeah.
was it easier to process your mom's passing versus your dad's? Because I mean, it's a lot after, right?
So funny enough, I always
Mm,
used to be closer to my dad. So when my dad passed away, I say this without any guilt, but I was like, fuck, I'm stuck with the one parent that I actually don't get along with, who
right,
doesn't open up to
right.
me and connect with me. Also, my mom and of course my brother Alex, who because they were together in prison together, they're so close. They're like a nuclear thing. So my mom has always favored him. Alex could fuck up, literally sink a car in a lake and it'd be okay. Meanwhile, I just drop a drop of water. Yo, let me go get the broom. So I was
Yeah.
always jealous of my brother Alex, always, because he was always the favorite of my mom and he was always protected, which really created an even bigger divide between the two of us. But after my dad passed away,
Mm,
I think that having lost him, I was like, you know what? Fuck, man, I gotta make an effort to connect with my mom. I don't know when she could be going. So let me just at least go do groceries with her. Just do anything, drive her, pick up her bags, whatever it is, just so that I can like at least have some time with her. And I made sure to call her every Sunday. And even if it was just like a one-sided conversation, at least I'm like, you know what? I'm doing my part. And at least I won't live with any regret when she goes. And I'm glad I did that. Because when she went, I was like, fuck. It was you know what? When my mom passed away, fuck, man, I didn't realize how much I loved her. Although we weren't close, but yeah, man, it's like one of the worst things that can happen to someone.
yeah, I think about this fact quite often nowadays because I think just at that age where my parents are aging and they're very far away, very far away. I've had friends who like, just like a lot of us from Bangladesh, we moved to UK, Australia, Canada, the US, and so on. And I had a friend who, her father, she was in Australia, her father had a heart attack, but it takes 2 fucking days to fly back. By that time, it was already in the ground. They have to bury him. You don't like in Islamic culture, you can't hold on to a body. They have to transition, and that kind of stuff. That's just it makes me paranoid, to be honest. And then, of course, you have all the ideas of like all the thoughts of I have so little time, perhaps, to make amends, to start opening up. But it's also fucking hard because you're like, oh my god, why the fuck are you like this? And you try not to be a kid, but you turn into a fucking baby, right? It's so convoluted.
Yeah, man. The truth is, of course, looking back, I'm like, your parents, they're always doing their best for you, man. I don't think any parents literally wake up on the alarm goes off and they wake up, I'm going to be a fucking shitty dad or a shitty mom. No
Yeah,
parents do that. I don't
yeah.
think so. I hope not. So I think our parents, man, we just got to accept them for who they are and how they are and know that they really have given us everything that they
How did you
could.
grieve?
Holy fuck. So when my dad passed away, I literally fucked off to Asia and bought a one-way ticket. I went to Asia. So my dad was getting cremated and the urn was basically going to be moved to Vietnam. So my mom was taking care of that. So I decided to basically just take a leave of absence from work and just started traveling to Asia before making my way to Vietnam by the time my mom got there. And honestly, man, I just went to these like different Buddhist temples and went into this mode of being in
Mm.
service and devotion, just being a volunteer, helping these different Buddhist monasteries with any kind of work, man. I did ceiling tiles, anything that these monks would need. I ended up touring, went to Japan, Thailand, China, Hong Kong, Singapore, and I would just basically I didn't have any hotels, hostels, anything. I literally showed up to monasteries and just offered to help with anything, food, whatever. So yeah, I was just basically for a few months just crashing from one monastery to another.
What was the hope here? What would being of service do for you? Did you have a rational? Obviously, it's not a rational thing at all. But I wonder what your motivation at that time was.
So the trigger was at my dad's funeral. So when we arrived in Montreal, I always remember that my dad was always helping the community. Every time that there would be new Vietnamese immigrant families arriving, he would basically take these families, take them to get their social insurance number, teach them how to drive a car, get a driver's license, how to do their taxes, and basically show them like, okay, this is life in Canada. This is all the documents you need. Help them to find jobs. So there was this one particular family that showed up at the funeral service, and so when the guests arrive, our family have to bow to thank whoever's coming to and thank them for coming. But when this family showed up and we bowed to them, they said, "No, we don't want you to bow to us. Like, we are here because we are so thankful for what your dad did for us. It's not you who should be thanking us.
Mm.
It's us that has to be thanking you." And it really left me with such a mark that although my dad had been through so much, he was always giving, he was always benevolent, altruistic, and it really set me on a path of fuck it. I want to just take away all materialism and just go back to basic. What is it to help another human being? That.
Merlin, I've spoken to a lot of people on this podcast, but I think this feeling that you're expressing, it's getting me emotional because ultimately a lot of us who go through our healing journeys, we have to ask ourselves over and over again, what the fuck do I actually stand for? Because yes, transformation, but transformation for what? For what? What is the
Yeah.
what is the point of it? And it's so wonderful, and I'm so grateful to you for sharing so openly about this what I can feel like is a deeply painful, but also a really beautiful thing because you have the chance to ask, what parts of my father do I want to carry with me? Because in your memory, in your heart, he
Yeah.
lives, right? The values that
Yes.
he embodies, now you embody, right?
Yeah.
Where did your medicine journey start? Was it during this time? Was it before? Was it amplified at this time? Where did that come in?
Yeah. So prior to my dad's passing, I was using drugs recreationally, straight up. But after his passing, I just remember having brought some mushrooms with me on this trip. And I think I was in Thailand. And I ended up doing maybe 3 grams. I was on a beach, and then the medicine just brought
Mm,
all the pain, all the sadness, all the
mm,
grieving, and it amplified it. It was a challenging trip. I wanna say it was a bad trip in that sense, but fuck, it was challenging. It was hard. I wanted it to fucking stop, and I decided, "Okay, I'm just gonna surrender to this now, and I'm just gonna lean into it because there's no way. The only
yep.
way out is through." And so then, yeah, man, I just fucking cried. And I realized that throughout the whole entire time from my dad, knowing that my dad was going to pass away, man, the arrangements for the funeral service,
Mm,
I
mm,
had numb. I completely numbed myself because I needed to be grounded and strong for my
mm.
mom, for my siblings. And I didn't allow myself to cry. I didn't allow myself to feel at all. And yeah, the medicine just fucking ripped my heart out, and literally, I just ended up fucking sobbing for
Mm,
hours on this
mm.
beach by myself. And it was the most fucking cathartic experience that I needed. As you know, the medicine always gives you what you need. And from that moment, I was like, wow, okay, trapped emotions, needed release. It's out in the open. And then I got into like journaling. I was like, fuck, I need to journal all of this out. And that helped too. And then that's what really, yeah, my dad's passing was the catalyst to me getting on this medicine
That's
journey.
beautiful. It gives me this. Maybe I'm wrong here, but what you feels like your journey, your relationship to your parents, where you were, let's say, relative to let's say someone like Alex, and your journey now, it's quite unique, right? I don't know if anybody else in your family is talking about mushrooms and all that stuff. Why do you think that is?
I think in every family, there's like that one off black
You're
sheep
talking to that
who's
one
the
in my family for
disruptor,
sure.
who's the cycle
Yep,
breaker.
yep,
This
yep.
guy, culprit. Yeah.
Why do you think that is? Why was it you? Did you have something to prove?
I
Were
mean,
you more curious?
I don't know that did I have something to prove? I always love being a shithead. Personally, I
Yeah.
thoroughly enjoy being a
Get into a
disruptor.
lot of
I
trouble?
think
Yeah.
I yeah, yeah. I fucking love I'm a thrill seeker. It's in my chart. And so I think in order doing something that is dangerous, different, it really it
I
resonates with
also
me.
wonder though, and speaking from, I guess, like I said, I'm also the black sheep in my family, and not that I'm trying to be, but I think there's always a part of me that was like, I need to know who I am. I need to know who I am, and like for me, music and art, these things were always not just a nice thing; it was a must. It was the vehicle by which I could go inwards without being terrified, without and finding comfort in the fact that I'm very different. The fact that in a lot of my life I felt very isolated and alone and paralyzed by doubt. But I think, if you trust yourself enough times, these journeys become more and more validating. And you're not like a rebel without a cause. There is a cause behind the rebellion. You know what I mean?
100%, brother. Absolutely. Have intention, every time now, like your cause is your
What's okay,
intention.
so I'm curious, what's it like with between you and Alex now?
Oh man, so Alex, I mean, he's never touched one single drug, period, and haven't even smoked cannabis, barely even drinks alcohol. But I love him so much. He calls me every week, once a week. He's always on the road, and also he's always asking me, "Yo, how's the
Mm,
mushroom business going?" And I find it so beautiful because although he doesn't understand anything, he still has interest for it. He still has
right,
interest
right.
in me
He
and
cares
what
that you
I'm
care.
doing. And exactly. And I think that's so beautiful.
Yeah, I think it's pretty wonderful, and I'm sure in time maybe more and more of your siblings and more and more of your family would be interested. It's just amazing to have a champion and ambassador in your family. That you're like, okay, I trust that person, and even if it's not gonna be me, I can refer somebody else to my brother. It's beautiful.
Yeah,
I want to switch gears a little bit, and again, I'm so grateful that
sure.
you shared really generously and openly. It's wonderful, and I think a lot of people will really be appreciative of your journey and how you've shared it. Let's talk a little bit about where you are today in Sero, because I think this is also a very meaty part of the podcast, because so much of where we are operating today is unknown, complex, still very stigmatized, criminalized. We sometimes forget how lucky we are to be in Canada. I mean, you look to the US,
Yeah.
you don't need a reason to shoot anybody anymore. Yeah, you have a tent pitched up on the university ground. Fuck, beat you with batons and tear gas and shit like that. So I sometimes forget how we are fortunate, not because the Canadians are so nice and shit. It's just it's different, right? We care about good government. If a country's tagline is like blah blah and good government, you're like it's fucking boring here. Okay, so let's talk about Sarah a little bit. Uh, you and your friend got started on this journey, and you built this company, Sero. I'm curious, how does a company like this that is operating and I'm just gonna be very cold about this in the sense like an unregulated, it's not even gray. I think a lot of lawyers will say it's actually illegal. How do you guys navigate the lack of certainty as a company, and where I imagine the constant threat of being shut down is always there?
It's the heart, man. We're compassionate renegade. We believe so wholeheartedly in the mission that I can't tell you how many times we've had our Instagram account shut down and had to build a new Instagram account. I can't tell you how many times we had, you know, bank account issues and whatnot. And we just keep going. And we kept going because it's just people's testament, man. Like our communities messaging us and outpouring these beautiful stories how this medicine is completely changing their lives and helping them coping with difficult situation. That is the motivator, man. Like we take risk and we have balls to do it because we care about other human beings and we care about offering people alternative modalities of medicine instead of these big farmers. Like sure, big farmers, I'm sure there's some very good medications and this and that, and it works for people. But I think it's time to go back to the root and show that Mother Nature has always been here and how has always
Mhm.
provided all the ingredients for you to be able to heal without even accessing synthetic.
You've hit on something that's really important, right? As an entrepreneur, I think conviction is first and foremost. And when you have conviction, it doesn't fucking matter, actually. Do you feel called to the mission? And you're doing, hey, and you're paying the bills and you're making enough money to feed yourself and just have a good life? Who gives a fuck, right? It doesn't matter.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Man, we started this company with 4 employees, now, yeah, like we're 14. Man, it's incredible, man. We're not only, of course, we're helping the community, but we're also like feeding like helping families being fed. Our colleagues are getting a livelihood from doing something that also is in alignment with them. And I think that's the beautiful thing too, is that every single one of my colleague, friends, family, like we're all in alignment because we all believe in that same mission.
Talking more tactically and tangibly, so you have an operation, right? And maybe just describe to us again. We know Sero, I know Sero, but describe to us as a company the lines of business. What do you guys do? What products and services are you selling? And then tell me a little bit about the operations again, given the complexity of the environment that you operate in. How do you ensure that you're producing a consistently safe, high quality, and enjoyable product?
In our case, we're in control of everything. We have our own farm, and I mean, I know this might sound crazy and woo-woo, but this farmer actually plays music to the mushroom,
I
has
believe it. I
crystals,
believe it.
talk to his mushrooms, call them his babies. And, we're firm believers that the vibration and frequency that is pouring out or pouring into the medicine from the get-go plays a huge role. Call us a bunch of hippies. I don't care, but like we stand by vibration of love
Right.
has to be there from the get go.
And it's a local farm,
And
right?
then,
In or
yeah,
around.
obviously, at the local
Yep.
farm, yeah,
Yeah, CDX.
in city
Yeah.
X, town X. And then, of course, once the mushrooms are harvested, then or foraged, I guess I should call it that way. Then, of course, we bring it safely in a sterilized laboratory, and I call it a lab, but man, it's not even a lab. Of course, it's like a beautiful space, and man, like our employees are like literally dancing and having fun. One day I walk in, they're playing Euro 90s music. Another day they're playing like old school hip hop. I was like, there's just so much joy all the time. And I think that's the key important thing is that nobody feels like they were coming in to work. They're coming in to play and helping people by coming in to play. And then, yeah, in terms of like our products, essentially MJ, who's our founder, he and I know I can speak this openly because he's shared this. He used to be on a cocktail of antidepressant and also ADHD medicine. And that's what sparked the idea for him. I don't want to fucking go take these pharmaceuticals anymore. I need to find a more natural way. So then she did the research study, studied herbology and different adaptogens. And the very first love child of Sero was Light Bright, which essentially was, you know, ashwagandha, CBD, passion flower, and the mushroom and the magic. And we discovered that this can help people with anxiety and depression and give people a tool to wean off from their antidepressant. So that was the very first love child. The second love child was Viewmaster, which was created for ADHD and ADD for people to give people another tool to wean off from their Adderalls, Concerta, because it has cacao, ginseng, ginkgo biloba, and cordyceps. So I was like, hey, we just, if you use this, it gives you the same effect and you
Mhm,
don't have
mhm,
that
mhm.
same like up and crash of these medication. And then, of course, the Paul Stamets stack, niacin, lion's mane, and of course, the magic helps you with neurogenesis, can help you with Alzheimer, with brain concussion. So for us, our intention has always been to help people truly like with health, mental health from in the get go. But we also believe that
Mhm.
healing can be fun. It doesn't always have to be gloom and doom. So hence we started creating the chocolate bar, the cacao bar, which is, hey, now you have the ability to also still microdose by utilizing chocolate. So it's more fun. I can't tell you how many times we've had couples messaging us and go, man, this is the best date night medicine. Well, we share a chocolate bar together and like we get right into our feelings and freaking beautiful, man. So yeah, our intention is always coming from the heart and providing people tools to yes heal, but also to have fun
Mhm.
intentionally.
There's a lot of like mushroom shops popping up everywhere. Do you guys imagine being a purely e-coms business, or will there be stores? Are you going to attempt stores, I should rather say, because you don't know. So far, it looks like, okay, like one opened up in the East End a couple of days ago. And I asked this particularly because, like, how does a company like you plan how to grow? In the sense that there's lots of people to help. You also see an opportunity. I also think there's gonna be lots of questionable players, but you, who has a good reputation, people trust you. Why not fucking take their business? And I'm all for that.
Thank you, Barbara. Appreciate your support. Yes, we do have, of course, a plan to open a community hub. So for us, it will be more than just brick and mortar, more than a store. We're picturing a beautiful Zen garden in the backyard where people can come and microdose and journal, where we'll have like workshops to educate people who have no idea what they're doing, having these one-on-one consultation with people. So to aid them basically in their journey. So we want to be there throughout the whole journey from beginning to the end. And also our business model is that our we want our clients to actually never become our clients for
Mhm,
the rest of our
mhm.
like their lives. I know it's a terrible business model, but it's the only business model that we want to apply to, right? It's like this medicine is here to help you when you need it. It
Right.
shouldn't be a crutch.
There's also this other aspect, right? I always talk about like, there's the thing that you hear about the most is two extremes, right? Peak performance or peak suffering. And yes, they're both important, but there's an entire chasm in between where it's just about living life. You know, how do you use medicine when you go for a run, when you go for a hike, when you talk to your partner, when you're grieving your, having lost loved ones? There's lots of things. Life can be like, because that saying goes like, there's ecstasy and then there's laundry, right? Both, you can do medicine for both. And so, from that perspective, I agree with you, definitely.
Yeah, man. I think that's it's so important to know that these tools are here for you in any occasion, as long as it's done
Hmm.
intentionally.
What's the next chapter? By the way, I really appreciate that vision. I think there's a huge opportunity here to, that thing that people always said would happen to cannabis, where you're gonna go into a place and Hotbox Cafe back in the day should have this, and then it all got fucked up with this shitty, mediocre. Every fucking shawarma shop is now a cannabis store after the pandemic. It's just so shitty, right? It never happened where you come and it's a cultural experience. With microdosing, there's a big space because the people who are into cannabis, I don't know if you read the sort of the national survey that Savvy Mind, one of the clinics in out west, Hisu Cho, who's been on the podcast, a good friend of mine and the founder, they ran this national study of what are the people's motivations who are doing, let's say, things like recreational drugs like cannabis, let's say cocaine and so on, versus mushrooms and DMT and so on, miles apart, you know. Over, I'm generalizing here, but one is for escapism, not that it's a bad thing at all, but other is mostly personal development and contemplation. So having a cafe or like a place, a sanctuary of some sort where you microdose together, maybe fucking make some music and shit like that, makes total sense.
Absolutely. And, to further the plan even more, I'll share with you is that we actually want to create retreat centers where people actually can come and do macro ceremonies as well.
When do you see that kind of thing being more tangible, or is it tangible for you guys now? Is it something you're planning for in the near term or long term?
I'm going to say as soon as things are legalized, you'll definitely see
Beautiful,
brick and mortar.
amazing. Last question for you. In the sort of what are your hopes and I will say this, like I think it's important to phrase it this way. What are your hopes and fears for space, whether it's unregulated, underground, overground, medical, whatever that is? What are your hopes and aspirations, as well as fears and perils that we should watch out for?
My hope is that for the above ground and underground to collaborate, because I believe that there's so much beautiful data from the underground that the above ground don't get because they have to be regimented. And I think it's important for both to collaborate because when it comes to trips, when it's a beautiful trip, hey man, we don't need to talk about it. But when things go awry and goes to shit, like psychosis, all these things,
Hmm.
this is what we need to talk about, and this is what we should share. And we should have a pool of information to be able to help each other. Because what do you do when things go to shit? And I think that's the really key important for in terms of what I'm hoping for. One of my fears, of course, I mean, man, any kids who are asking an adult to buy this medicine to use it recreationally, and then of course he's gonna have the so-called bad trip because he was mixing with alcohol and any other substances, and then it gets on the news, and then the
Hmm.
stigma goes back up. That's my fear.
I mean, I think that's legitimate, and it is something that we all have to watch out for. Which is where I think education is so important, right? It's a medicine. You can use it for many things, but it's also not something to take lightly.
Yeah, I think that personally the best business model for psychedelics, or at least for mushroom, it should be like smart serve, where
Mm.
you go online, you read all the information for harm reduction, and then you're giving a permit, like a license. You show up at this dispensary, and this license allows you to buy, I don't know, 5 to 7 grams every 2 weeks or so. I think that is probably the best. Like, sure, it won't stop people from buying mushrooms for other people, but at least it'll have a certain level of responsibility, integrity,
I
and
totally
harm
agree. I mean,
reduction.
reduce the risk, right? Risk of something going wrong, and ultimately, hey, why the fuck is cigarettes and alcohol legal, and nobody worries about it, fusses about it, given the but ironically, they kill the most people, right? So it's something that's why I like psychedelics so much, because it's more than the substance. It actually questions the entire system, right? Okay, last question. I lied the last time, not the last question. So this is the last question, and we'll leave it here. What are your what's your advice to people out there who will listen to this podcast, to whom they can resonate with your story, but the medicine is still scary? What do you say to them?
I would say to those people who still are living in the fear with that stigma, to just diligently go out there, educate yourself, reach out, reach out to me, reach out to Sero, and we will help you with whatever information, or at least help you connect you with somebody. But don't have any fear. Don't feel that you're going to be judged. You have a safe space in the psychedelic community, there are people who are here to help you without any judgment and with discretion.
Fuck yeah. And then how do people find you, Merlin and Sero?
Yeah, you can connect with us at heysero.co. So heysero.co.
Yeah.
And can I
Fuck yeah, of
shamelessly plug
course.
a discount code here? Yeah, if you want a family discount code, 15%, it's magic, ITSMAGIC. And yeah, if you guys can connect with us on an Instagram account. And literally, if you message us, there's a human being that will connect with you. We actually even have a psychotherapist on our team who actually takes care
Wow.
of the
That's
inbox.
that's amazing. We'll also put this discount code in the captions when we post this episode. Merlin, thank you so much. Definitely one of the highlights for me in terms of episode. I definitely enjoyed the conversation, and I think the way you shared your experience and your journey so far really got me contemplating, and I really appreciate that.
Forever. Thank you so much for your time. And truly, keep doing what you're doing because we also fucking need you.
I appreciate that, bro. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. This podcast was brought to life with the help of Carolyn Tripp on art and design. Thanks so much for listening to Minority Trip Report. If you're learning from or enjoying the podcast, please subscribe to MTR on YouTube at Minority Trip Report and follow us on Instagram at Minority Trip. It's a zero-cost way to support us and help us spread the word. Please also sign up with your email for new episode announcements, events, as well as our forthcoming newsletter. I'm your host, Raj Suraj. See you next time.